Welcome to our instructional video on how to complete the CSS profile. If you're new to CSS profile, this is similar to the FAFSA, but it does ask additional investment questions, and it is required by over 500 colleges nationwide. So not as many as the FAFSA. I would encourage you to complete that first. It gives you more experience with answering these type of technical questions. This should take at least an hour for you to complete, and sometimes it's good to just do it in a couple of sittings. It is the website. Use the username and password for the website that you register your student for SAT, PSAT, or AP exams, right? So if you just Google CSS profile, this is what you'll see. This is what comes up. And if you want to check out the list of participating colleges, you can just click right here. I'll bring you right there. It's in alphabetical order. It does have the 22, 23 participating colleges. Do check that because many colleges are dropping out of requiring the CSS profile because it is so robust, let's say. Once you know where you're going, you get here to this place and you know which colleges you need to add to the list. I think the easiest way to find out if the college does require it is to just Google the name of the college, a financial aid office, and usually it'll say application process. It'll tell you what the deadlines are, and it'll tell you that they require the FAFSA. It'll tell you if they require the CSS profile, and then any institutional documentation that they want. And it'll also give you the deadlines. Deadlines can vary if your student is applying early decision, early action, or regular action. So the CSS profile and the FAFSA open every year October 1st for the following academic year. So that's why you see here fall 22 to spring 23, and you'll just click that button and it will take you right into the CSS profile, and here you go. So I had already logged in, and we are going to get started on the fall 2022. And it says continue application. So we're just going to continue the application. Here it asks the getting started section here. You have to fill this out before it even lets you into the full application. Unfortunately, there is nowhere that you can get a PDF like the FAFSA and print it out so that you can look at how you'll answer these questions ahead of time. So you kind of just, it's baptism by fire. You just got to get in here and get these questions answered. So like I said, sometimes the getting started section is good to start and then come back to. You'll see here, this is very basic information about your student that you know offhand very easily. Remember, you always want to look at who you're answering the questions about because it does get a little confusing in here. Am I answering about the parent or the student? So never married is the student. And then it'll ask if you have a College Board financial aid ID. Most of the time you don't, so leave that blank. It'll ask about the student's citizenship, and also it'll ask about the Social Security number. This is a fictitious one in here in this site that I'm using for demonstrative purposes, but you can click the show button to see if it's the right one. And you just hit save and continue. So it'll ask you dependency questions just like the FAFSA asks. It asks if the student has any legal dependents, if they're a veteran, is the student 18 years or older, and were they a ward of the court before they were 18 or in foster care? And is there somebody else, are they an emancipated minor or somebody else that is the guardian? Also, they'll ask about them being at risk for homelessness, just like the FAFSA does. And then it'll ask about student information. Where do they live? And you'll put that information in there and just select mailing address is the same if that's the case. And then you'll put the student's date of birth in here. Make sure that is accurate because they will bump it up against other documents and there'll be a problem if it's not. Okay, student's phone number, all of that. And then you'll confirm that information and it'll let you go forward in the system. And in addition to that, it'll ask about the parents, whether you are married, divorced, separated. You should be putting the parents' information in here, okay? And this is mom here for our demonstrative purposes, and this is dad. And we're going to save and continue. And so we're saying that in this household, we're divorced just so that it doesn't duplicate information and to be able to get this done for you in a timely way. It might be helpful to have this up as you're going through your CSS profile. You can just pause it as you answer questions. I find that that is helpful. It does ask who the student lives with the most and which parent information you'll be submitting. So in this case, we're going to be submitting moms. Asks where the parent lives. This is very basic information. And then it'll begin to ask academic information. So it asks the grade that the student's in. So we're doing a traditional student here, 12th grade, applying for colleges, and we'll be entering in the fall 2022. You have to list the high school. So you just hit the high school search and you can pull up your high school. If you can't find it after 3 searches, it allows you to self-enter if you have some obscure high school in there. And then it does ask if your student is attending private high school and how much they receive in scholarships and how much did their parents pay for their education, because private colleges do take this into account. So if you have other students, you would be listing that later on as well. If you don't know how to answer the question, you'll notice here that there's little boxes popping up to give you a helpful hint of how would you answer that if you get stuck. So save and continue. Here you can just add all the colleges that are requiring the CSS profile. I like to search by program name because it's easier. You know, they're not titled correctly in this system. So if you're looking for something in Boston, for example, I would just put Boston in, look at the colleges, and then add them. For today's purposes, I just added Boston University and I'm moving on. Most times you'll have a couple on here. So they'll ask you to select which year in school they are. So this is first year undergraduate, never attended. And if there's an ID already assigned, then you would put it in there. Usually not. Will they be staying on campus? When in doubt, always put on campus. And then what type of application are they applying? You should know this because let's say you select early action for BU. They don't have early action. They have early decision and regular decision, right? So you should know that about your students' college list. Ask them. They should be able to tell you that. Now we're just putting the parent details in here. So the date of birth, the social security number, mom's email. In here, they're asking about their employer. So are you employed or self-employed? If you're both, you can select both. Okay. Have you been in the armed forces? Are you a dislocated worker? What is your occupation? What is the name of your employer? How many years have you been there? And then if you're participating in or plan to participate in an IRA, 401k, 403b, KEOG, tax deferred retirement plan. If you plan to draw on Social Security, you would put that there. And then it asks you to list, this is different than the FAFSA, current value of tax deferred and after tax retirement pensions, annuities, and savings plans, such as an IRA, a Roth IRA, a KEOG, a SEP, 401k, 403b, any of those listed there, you should put the current value for that parent. So here for Kelly, we put 110,000. And then we're also going to give dad's information, but if you notice, he lives at a different address because we said there was a divorce, asked for the year of separation, year of divorce. Okay, how much will the parent contribute? If you know that answer, then you can put that in there. Is there an agreement specifying this contribution? And any other additional information. So if you don't have much information on the non-custodial parent, then you can put some information in there about that. And then their email, because it's going to generate a notification to that parent and ask them to fill out the non-custodial CSS profile on their side. So one thing I would let that other parent know is that you cannot see each other's information. So that's important for everyone to know so that they feel like their financial information is safe. And then it's going to ask about income. And you can see right here on the left-hand side all the different categories, and you can click and go back to them and ask about, did the parent file their federal tax returns for 2020? Remember, you need to remember which year you're answering questions for. So you put that in there. They ask you what type. So this is a US tax return, a 1040. And then it asks you the type of filing status. If you don't know your filing status, if you look at the top of your 1040 federal taxes, it will tell you what you filed. So for this mom, she's filed head of household. And then it'll ask you what type of schedules do you have on that 1040. Because we're not tax preparers, we may not know about Schedule 1, 2, 3, and all of these other things. All you need to do is flip through your taxes past your 1040 and see if you have a Schedule 1, 2, or 3. Usually a 2555 or 8959 are not normal, average. So you may not have it, but thumb through your documents. They're titled right at the top. Sometimes you have to staple them to be able to see the title of that document. Many times you'll have a Schedule 1, but most times you won't have Schedule 2 or 3. And then you'll put in your information from your 1040, right? So it is referring right to the lines of the 1040 of where you'll find this information. There's no way to import from the IRS like the FAFSA, so you're going to have to hand enter. And I would tell you, any box that you have nothing in, just put a 0 in it. So you just look at line 1 and you put your wages and salaries in there. Same thing with line 2 and taxable interest, 2B, ordinary dividends. Over here, I would just tell you if you might have a rollover. So many times if you look in line 4A, your accountant will specifically type in rollover. So then you would know that's what it is. Sometimes you do have those. So you continue down through answering all the questions based on your 1040, line 4B, onto line 5A and B. Social Security benefits come out on line 6A. So any box that you have a number in, you should match it up to these lines and get that accurate number in there. Standard deduction, federal taxes paid, that's line 22. So that's on the second page of your 1040. Sometimes we don't like to look at that number, but that's the amount of taxes you paid to the federal government. And then also on line 27 and 28, you would list that if there were any numbers in those boxes and just hit save and continue. Then it would say right up here, you got to keep looking up in this corner to see who you're answering questions about and what document is it referring to. So this is the Schedule 1 because I said that I had filed the Schedule 1. Schedule 1 typically doesn't have a lot of numbers on it. But for this parent, it had unemployment compensation. Otherwise, just put zeros where there are zeros on your Schedule 1 and fill in the numbers if they're asking for those boxes. And save and continue. So how much did Kelly earn, right? it's going to tell you, how do you get, how much did Kelly earn? Okay, so you can look at your W-2 forms in box 1 to get that information, or you can just look at your 1040 line 1 or schedule 1 lines 3 and 6. There's many ways to go find that information. I find the easiest way, if you just have one W-2 form, then you just look at your W-2 box 1. Okay, and then here it's asking about deferred pension and retirement savings. So enter the amount the student's parents contributed just in 2020. So once again, you can find out where that is. The easiest document for that to be on is your W-2, boxes 12A through S. Now you may see a box 12DD, and it could be a big number. Don't put that in there. That is your contributions that your employer made to your medical plan. And you don't want to include that. Just keep that in mind. So 12D through S, usually you have nothing in 12S, by the way, but 12DD, be cautious. Do not include that in here. And then if you do have flexible spending account, you would put that amount in there. So health savings account, same thing. You would add that information in there. And then it would go on to talk about parent income and benefits. So the total amounts the student's parents received for 2020. So if they received Social Security benefits, alimony, income from other members of their household, any food, housing or living. A lot of times that could be clergy or military. So typically that's not very common, right? Money given to them or paid on their behalf, you would list there. Other untaxed income, including workman's compensation and untaxed disability benefits. So then you would keep going, and it's going to ask you to predict for 2021. What do you think, Kelly's, your income will be for 2021? If you're married, it'll ask you for each parent. Here, you would take your latest pay stub, look at the year to date, and say, okay, am I on track to make more or less than what I made in 2020? And you can estimate based on that. And it will also, this is new, so they'll say, okay, was the parents' 2021 income significantly impacted due to COVID-19 pandemic? So I would say if your income decreased by at least 7%, then the answer to that would be yes. And you would list that there. Later on, you'll have a special circumstance box where you can put an explanation in there. Do students' parents expect to have significant income changes in 2022? And you could list that yes or no, depending upon your case. Here, I'm selecting that the student is receiving free or reduced lunch. It's based on mom's income, but most of your students may not have, you may not be getting food stamps or reduced or free lunch, WIC from women and infants and children, like free food and food subsidy or SSI, or temporary assistance to needy families or Medicaid. Less common in the average family, but if that's the case for you, please select that. And then it will ask about child support. Do the parents of this household pay it, or did the parents of this household receive it? And so they mean for 2020, right? If you're going to calculate the amount received right here, you want to put the actual amount you received, not just what was court ordered. If you got less than the court order, then you should put that in there, okay? Total amount received for student. So if you have more than one student, then you would back out the siblings portion of that. And is it court ordered or not? So housing information is the next section that they want to talk about. They want you to list the address that you're living with the student at, and then they'll ask you if you own your home, rent, live with others, right? And we're saying that mom owns her own home for demonstrative purposes. What is the monthly housing payment? And so I would put that in there, and then the year that the house was purchased, what was the purchase price, what's the current market values. You have to think about that, what you could get for the house without improvements today, right? And then total amount owed. And then if you added an equity at some point during that time frame, you would separate that out from the primary original mortgage. And then you just save and continue. Now we're going to go on to parent assets. And this is asking you, do you have investments or assets? Do the parents have assets that they own but are held in the names of the children? Typically not, but this mom has some investments, not a lot, but a little bit. So we need to disclose that. And you just hit save and continue. And it will ask you, do you have own real estate? I think it skipped actually that section. So mom's assets, we need to put that in there. So it's asking you current amount in cash, savings, checking, and deposit accounts. So for mom, that would be 5,000, and then current market value of investments. Okay, minus the investments that you already disclosed. You disclosed your current values of your 401ks. So you shouldn't be double reporting that, okay? And the student's parent doesn't own additional real estate or a business or a farm. If you do operate a business, you would select that on there. It's also asking about expenses. So does the parent have medical or dental expenses not covered by insurance? And I selected yes. And here, I put in here what the additional expenses were for 2020, and then what I think the expenses will be for 2021. These are estimates, and typically, rule of thumb, once again, if it's over 7% of your adjusted gross income, then it's significant enough to put in there. If you read the details on the side, it encourages you from 3% of your adjusted gross income. So that's okay. But I would be including it. And then it asks about who's in the household. You can add more dependents here. So if you have another student in the house, whether or not, if you're divorced, whether or not you have claimed them on your 1040, that does not matter still. You will list them as a dependent. If they're in your household and you're providing care and support for them more than half of the year, then you should put them in here, okay? Also, if you have an elderly parent, you could put that in there too if you are supporting. And then it's going to go on to ask questions about the student. So not all students file or are required to file. In this case, for demonstrative purposes, we're saying that the student's not filing, they didn't need to file. And, you know, did they make income from work? Yeah, let's say that they did, but not enough to have to file. Okay, they're a non-filer. All the same questions you were asked as the parent. And over here, it's going to ask about income they expect to earn in the summer. So I'm going to say that the student's going to try to work and then answer the questions accordingly for your student about what you expect them to earn along the way. I would try not to go over $5,000 collectively for the year. And then student resources. So how much does the student expect to receive from the following sources for 2022 to 23? Their parents. So you would not put anything in here that you plan to borrow, but the parent could say, okay, I can contribute $7,000. How much are you getting in scholarships? You typically do not know that by the time that you're filing the CSS profile, especially the first year. They're still a senior in high school, may not have gotten or received any of their financial aid award letters, so they wouldn't know. Is an employer contributing to their education? That's not really typical for high school students. Are relatives going to be contributing? Now, some relatives tell us they're going to, and then the time that comes to write the check, unless you've received the funds, I would not be reporting it. Okay, and now we're going to talk about student assets. So for the most part, most students don't have assets. So I'm not even clicking investment, retirement assets, or trust. But if they do have these, you would put that in there. That does not mean a 529, right? So here it's asking me, how much does a student have in cash savings and check it and a deposit account? And the student doesn't have very much. And then it asks if the student owns any real estate or business or farm. That's not typical for our average student either. Now we're on to special circumstances. So this is important. If you do have exceptional medical and dental or change in employment or COVID-19 really impacted your family's income, a catastrophic event or natural disaster, that could be an uninsured, let's say your roof got ripped off your house and it wasn't insured. That's catastrophic. You had to pay for a funeral, had large legal bills, elderly care expenses, supporting another family member, things of that nature. So they give you a little room down here to talk about it. So you can see here I put, we have uncovered medical, dental, and vision expenses each year of more than $5,500. These expenses include, give them an idea, braces, counseling fees, and more. They will be asking for verification, receipts, if it's RX expenses or other expenses that you're saying you paid, they will want proof of payment as well. And then you're getting towards the end. So unfortunately, we cannot show you customized questions. Depending upon the colleges you add to the list, they could ask additional questions. The more common ones would be, what type of vehicles do the family have? Is there any debt on them? How old are they? Do you have life insurance? There's only a couple of colleges that ask that. So you would have to answer them. And then you would go all the way to the bottom. I would suggest printing this and putting it in a financial aid folder for yourself. Okay. And you can go back and update it and change it, right? Remember, I just want to point out that it will ask you along the way if you have a 529 and only list for that student if you have that. If you have twins, triplets, something of that nature, or other siblings, do not list that in this CSS profile. List for the student that you're completing the CSS profile for. And then you save and continue. And then it would tell you the charges. If you meet certain income requirements, it will waive it. So I got a waiver here for this student because of, well, it could have been the adjusted gross income, but what it actually was selecting the free and reduced lunch made this a waivable event. So you could just hit submit. And then what will happen is you will get a request for in about 24 hours. Once you submit that, they will ask you to log in. Some of the colleges want you to upload, it's called the IDOC system. They want you to upload your W-2s, 1040s, maybe your Schedule 1. If you have a small business, they want Schedule C. They'll ask for a list of documents. Unfortunately, some other colleges don't use the IDOC system within College Board, right? So that means that you would have to upload it based on their requests. So that could be faxing it to them, emailing it to them, uploading it in the student portal. So just be aware of that. I was just checking to see if the iDoc system was up yet for this application so I could show it to you. You will get an email when that happens, and then you just log back in, and then it tells you the documents that they want you to upload. You can scan them in. It's easy to scan in with a phone. I use Tiny Scanner on my phone for it, and it's super easier that way. Just some suggestions. But be aware of that because it's not complete until they have that. So I hope this is helpful. I hope this helps you get the CSS profile submitted for your student this year.